Enumeration District Definition Primer. Why, where, what? With emphasis on the 1930 to 1950 U.S. censuses. This video, taken from some of my previous YouTube videos and augmented with new material, will concentrate on census district definitions, what they are, how to use them, and where to find them. This was recorded on October of 2021. This is really the second kind of primer. The first one was on the use of enumeration district maps with emphasis on the 1940 and 1950 censuses. This one, the present one, is going to concentrate on the enumeration district definitions, the definitions. As you go through this video, remember that at the one-step website, Steve Morse one-step website, you will find transcribed enumeration district definitions that are fully searchable on a unified tool, and I'm showing you the address there, stevemorse.org/census/unified.html. So what is a census enumeration district? And I'm doing this against the backdrop of the population schedule for 1950. You see that there's a space for the ED number. And the National Archives definition is that it is a basic geographic area of a size that could be covered by a single census taker within one census period. That's the enumeration district, or ED. Until 1880, the U.S. Census was based on state, county, township, or city. But then after that, or starting at 1880, enumeration districts became the basic sampling unit. And we're going to use EDs throughout the rest of the video. So why use them? Well, as many of you know, if you're looking at this in 2021, that the 1950 census is going to go online, become public in April of 2022. And there won't be a name index for some time. But if you have an address or a location, you have a chance of finding that residence and the people in it. And so you start with an address location. You need to translate that into an enumeration district number. And that number will be the key for you finding the pages of population schedule that you need to look through. So I'm going to show you a bunch of uses, other uses. For instance, you don't quite know where the people are. You know they're in some county or maybe some part of a city, and you want to easily find or get a list of all the ED numbers and their definitions in the hope maybe they would jog your memory. You're looking for ED numbers of all the orphanages in the state, or convents, or even maybe a circus, if it was on the ED definitions, and we can do that. We can get those lists. And then finally, in this section here, although you have the ED number of your target, you still can't find that ED on the census schedules themselves, and want to look at the official description of this ED number. Now, these are earlier mistakes. I don't think I've seen one for 1940 and 1950, but it illustrates what I mean. So here we are in Granite City in Illinois. If you look at ED 59, there's an asterisk on it. And then on the bottom it says that through a misinterpretation of the boundaries of his district, an enumerator in Granite City failed to canvass 4 squares containing, according to a local census, about 600 persons. They're gone. They're missing. No correction of the population can be made, as the error was not discovered until after the population of the U.S. had been announced. Or this one, 1910 in Wyoming, in which this election district, the schedules are missing. Those people are not going to be on the census. Or this 1920 for Arizona. This is Glendale. Actually, it's Glendale town. And now we see that over 3,000 people, their schedules are missing. They're not going to be on the census. Some other uses too. You are researching a small urban area with a few ED numbers, probably less than 5. If there were 5 or more, the National Archives may have an ED map, but there probably is no map for you if you had, say, just 3 EDs. And so you're going to find your location on a county map. It's not going to be very clear, not very high resolution, and you want to narrow which ED has your target by drawing the described boundaries on a current map. It's one possibility there. You use the one-step unified tool to get an ED number, which we can do, and want to check it on the corresponding census definition to make sure we didn't make a mistake. We do make mistakes. So how is a specific ED defined? Well, it's usually a polygon area. Could be an institution, which might be a apartment complex within a larger ED. Could be a prison. It's a 2-part number that's important since 1930. An ED doesn't cross political lines. It doesn't straddle city limits or ward lines. And it may change. The area may have a different ED number, and that ED could have different boundaries between census years. So what does the prefix number signify if it's a 2-part number, and why did it change for some urban areas between census years? Well, beginning with the 1930 census, each ED number did have this prefix and a suffix number. And the prefix number is the county number. It was the county number in 1930. Example. Here we have Southern California. We have a number of counties surrounding Los Angeles County, which has a prefix of 19. The city of Los Angeles is in the county. It has a prefix of 19. But in 1940, 100 large cities of about 50,000 or more were given their own prefixes. And those numbers come after the last county number in the state. And the exceptions are large cities, which are themselves counties. And so now, this is 1940, the city of Los Angeles has a prefix of 60. Well, in 1950, they decided that cities of over 100,000 would have their own prefix. And the table on the right shows you all those new cities that will have their new prefix. They are given prefixes based upon their alphabetical order. So Los Angeles changes its position. The red ones are the ones that had a new prefix in 1940. And so here we are in 1950. And Los Angeles City now has the prefix of 66. A little confusing there. Now I'm concerned that beginners are going to make a mistake about ED numbers. And so this section is going to talk about places where you're not going to see the full 2-part, full numeric number. Let's look at splits first. And this is from our 1940 report. During the course of the canvass, area managers were authorized to subdivide established enumeration districts when necessary. Why would they do that? Because they originally misjudged how many people were in that enumeration district. A single enumerator could not do it. So the procedure to be followed allowed for the original number to be retained and the parts to be marked A, B, C added to the number. So the original number no longer exists, but the new number, which contains the original number plus a capital A, a capital B, could be subdivided into multiple parts, becomes the new enumeration district numbers. So as an example, here is Philadelphia. If we look closely at 51-1550, we see someone has put in pencil A, B, C, D, and E under 1550. And then very close next, we will see pages where the split EDs, their boundaries are shown or described. Now, ED maps usually don't show the splits because the splits were done, in 1950. The ED maps, the boundaries were put on existing maps probably in 1949. But split EDs are not a problem for the unified tool, neither is the changing ED prefixes. And we will get you to the right enumeration district, whether it's split or not. Fort Worth, Texas is an unusual example of splits. I found on average about 3% of urban EDs are split. But in the case of Fort Worth, Texas, it wasn't unusual to see an enumeration district split into a tremendous number of parts. On the map, Fort Worth, Texas, 1950 map, shows it goes from 261-1 to 261-335. But 238 of those EDs are split into 675 parts. So 238 of the original numbers don't exist anymore. They exist only as splits. And so the total EDs in this city was 772. So if you were to enter the number that had been split without adding the A, B, and C, the program that you're entering the number into might say no such ED. I think the reason they wanted so many splits was because Fort Worth had a program, and the program, I understand, was in other parts of the U.S., where they wanted school teachers to be enumerators to see whether they got a better product. So this is a possibility of why Fort Worth has so many splits. Large city maps can also create problems for you. Here is San Francisco 1950. The numbers in the circle are census tracts. The ED numbers are in orange, as are their boundaries. And you say, hey, they're not two-part numbers. Yeah, that's true. They did not repeat for large cities the prefix in these ED boxes. So how do you know what the prefix is? What you do is you look for the first legend on the map. If the city has multiple submaps, they may have multiple legends, but probably only the first legend will show you this, that all ED numbers for San Francisco are preceded by 38. So that's the prefix. So be aware of that. How many EDs were there? Quite a number. In 1930, we transcribed over 122,000. In 1940, over 156,000. And in 1950, it just jumped much faster than the population to over 250,000 enumeration districts. What information is on an ED definition? Well, there are unincorporated community names, county names, city, town names, post offices, boundary streets, political lines, institutions like convents, orphanages, large hospitals, Lots of things are on enumeration district definitions. And you can search for those terms on our unified tool, as I mentioned at the beginning. Also, you'll find that you might find the population of the ED on that census year and the previous census 10 years earlier, a ward number, a census tract number. You might see a list of individual block numbers in large cities, and that was used for housing schedules. You might find when you look at the definition of your ED number that the definition shows no population. That is, no one was found to be put on the population census sheet. Perhaps it was an industrial or commercial area with no apparent residents, or a cemetery with no living caretaker. Let's look at institutions. So my example here is Manhattan, New York, New York, in 1930. We see that there is an enumeration district 31-336 at the top. We see that there's an apartment here excluding an apartment and an address there. What that means is that that apartment was excluded to its own enumeration district. It's out of 336 and was given to its own enumeration district in 337. It's actually within 336. It's actually within that enumeration district, but it has its own number. If you look at 336, there are some other institutions there. They don't have their own number, but they're shown separately, meaning that their inhabitants start on a new page, a new census page. You may also see something called a cross index on the ED definitions. Here is a 1930 to 1920 San Francisco city. If we look at the upper left, we'll see the 1930 ED number is shown, and the 1920 EDs that make up the 1930 enumeration district area. We found that useful for some of our transcriptions. We're going to talk about the format of these EDs in a second. Here's another one showing you 1940, 1930. This is a rural area. But in 1950, you're not going to see that cross table. There's only one column there, and that will show the 1950 enumeration district number. Now, I'm going to show you examples of rural and urban enumeration district definitions. This is from McCulloch, Texas, 1950. You can see, gee, there's not much information there. How would you know where your location was? Probably in this situation, you might go to the enumeration district map. And those maps are available right now. And remember, I have a primer on how to use ED maps. But I'm going to show you something else that I did with McCulloch, Texas in a second. You might see a rural area like this. This is Barron County, Kentucky, where there is a unincorporated community, Temple Hill in 514. That's shown on a separate sheet within 514, but the magisterial district is also called Temple Hill. And in this case, at least we know what's north or south of some important road, and we know where the county line is. These aren't polygons per se, but these are. There's enough information here to figure out what you're looking for. Here is our Bibb County, Alabama again. I want to show you this. Here they show 3 unincorporated communities. And in 1940, unincorporated areas of 100 or more people were shown on the definitions. But in 1950, and let me clear this up a little bit, In 1950, they did not show those unincorporated areas. Instead, they only showed unincorporated areas that had clearly defined boundaries on the ED map or had 1,000 or more population. So that one 1940 ED was divided into two for 1950, but we've lost information. We've lost where those unincorporated communities are. I thought that was, that was nice. So I went and looked at 4,700 plus 1950 ED county maps and added to our transcribed definitions of EDs any community name that I thought was a community. Might have been a geographical area. Might have been something like Four Corners. And I added quite a number. About 79,000 additional names. So looking at McCulloch, Texas, our transcribed definitions, you'll see that I added and should contain a bunch of names I found on the county map. And those are searchable by name on the one-step tool, unified tool. If we look at urban ED definitions, they're either boundaries or blocks. Let's look at boundaries first. Here is Lodi City, San Joaquin, California, 1940. You notice that it says that for 39-16, it's bounded by. Those are boundaries. And it turns out that there are 4 lines here. The lines are the polygons, the north side, the east, south, and west side of the polygon. There is a sanitarium there. It is on a separate sheet, starts on a separate sheet within 39-16. Those boundaries are interesting. Many of them cannot be found today because they were political lines, changed with time. Railroad tracks can be abandoned and become trails, roadways. Streams can be diverted or paved over. And streets, their names can be changed. But there's something important I want to emphasize here. So here we have, again, these are boundary definitions. This is 1940 Burbank City. Again, we have a northeast, south, west boundaries, Magnolia being on the north. But those aren't all the streets that are in 19-169. In fact, there are lots of street names within it. So we were looking for residents on Avon, for instance, or California. They're not on the ED definition. They're not searchable on ED definition database. And that's one of the reasons why we made street lists of every single street within all these EDs of over 2,400 1950 city areas. Now, blocks were used for the largest cities in 1930 and 1940, 57 in 1930, and 200 plus in 1940. But in 1950, we're going to have boundaries for all urban areas. You can see that the blocks are very different. This is the city of Los Angeles in 1940. Each block is shown, and it's actually numbered on the ED map. And let's say block 17, again, the north side is Franklin, the east side is Tamarind, the south side is Yucca, and the west side is Beechwood. And there is an apartment there that starts on a separate page. But in 1950, they only have boundary definitions. Those small apartments that were really nice that showed in 1940 do not show in 1950. It's really too bad. So where are these ED definitions? Well, the scans of the definitions can be found on the National Archives catalog, familysearch.org, and the one-step website. The National Archives has a film series T1210, which has ED definitions for the 1900 census. It also has film series T1224, and that's the big one that has the 1930, 40, and 50 ED definitions as a film series. You can find the which roll you want, and that was the old way of doing it. You go into the National Archives and pull a roll out maybe to take a look at it. You don't have to do that today. The National Archives catalog has these definition images, catalog.archives.gov. FamilySearch.org has digitized and put online much, if not all, of these National Archives ED definition films. NARA, by the way, is the National Archives and Records Administration. I independently scanned the 1940 and 1950 ED definition films. I explain how I do that in some of my YouTube videos for the one-step site, and Steve put them online at that address shown there. So we do have the scans for 1950, and right now we're the only ones that have those scans online. But these are scans, I want to emphasize that, of official Census Bureau ED definitions. And these are graphics, and they're not easy to visually search. We transcribed them, and they are easy to search on a computer. So let's look at transcriptions. Now, it turns out that the National Archives does have transcriptions of the 1940 EDs, and I'm showing you the address for that. I actually helped with the production of the ED information. But it's still easier to use the one-step website. And the one-step website has searchable transcriptions of the 1880 to 1950 ED definitions at stevemorse.org/ed/ed.php. And those are integrated into the Unified tool, and that's why we call it the Unified tool. I'm showing you where that is as well. Steve Morse website, there's a look at it. It's at stevemorse.org, not at .com, and you will want the Unified tool on the U.S. Census section. Now, I have a number of 1950 videos, some of them on how to use the searchable ED definition databases at the one-step site. I have one on showing you how we actually created these databases. Another one on demonstrating doing an urban and rural location search to get an enumeration district as well. Okay, so I thought it was important to have this primer, just as I thought it was important to have one on enumeration district maps. This is on the definitions. And so I hope that this is going to reduce the learning curve that you will have and make you better prepared when the 1950 census comes online in April of 2022. This has been another of my JDW talks. That's my channel name. I have YouTube talks on genealogy topics, not only the 50 census, but other census years as well, and other topics as well of census topics. Ellis Island immigration. I am a retired field biologist. I have natural history topics, virtual birding field trips, including the last one where I took you out at night and we looked at migrating birds across the harvest moon. And then a number of other YouTubes on things of interest to me. I used to collect novelty zithers and sang biology songs in my classes. So good luck in finding your people on the 1950 census. Remember, you can do it by location if you have a location or address. Good luck.